If we're now streaming, we're ready to go, right?
Give me one moment, please.
Yep. Marty DeCat, would you please rename yourself?
Of course. I thought I clicked the right one.
Well, you are recording and you are live on YouTube and you do have quorum and you have members of the public here.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Executive Committee meeting for Manhattan Community Board 4 for the month of January. We are holding this meeting remotely because Governor Cuomo said we could. And we have an agenda for tonight. Before we get into it, I want to thank our board member, Frank Holozubiak, for being here tonight under really extreme circumstances. And Frank, you have all of our condolences and wishes with you.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, so let's see if we can get through this kind of quickly. The first item on the agenda is a vote. It is a joint land use, Clinton, Hell's Kitchen, and Chelsea, to the Department of City Planning on the scoping hearing for the draft EIS on the expanded hotel special permit land use application. Who's taking this? JD, Paul, Betty, who wants this? Who drafted the letter?
Joe.
One of you has to take it.
Joe.
Joe drafted the letter. It's a joint letter from both committees. This is a kind of rushed job because I think we want to get something in. Is that right, Jesse? Some kind of comment?
Yes, the deadline for comment is actually before our full board, so that's why it's on your agenda tonight.
Right.
Yeah.
I think I'll just say what I think you were in the group, that it's a beautifully written letter and the points are excellently made, but it needs to be framed as comments for the draft scope. So I think that with some modification, it could be framed that way. And Paul and I have said the same thing about that.
Yeah, no problem, Betty. No problem. As I say, it's a rush trying to get something done, very complicated, complex sort of subject, but absolutely no problem. We'll craft it so you all are, everybody's happy with it.
All
Thank
right,
you, JP.
is there anyone on the exec board who has any questions about the draft letter? Marty, is that a hand?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
As I mentioned when we were talking about hotels, before I even saw a copy of this letter, which moves me educates me a lot, but leaves me with a lot of stuff I don't know about it. This is such a huge topic that I realize the board has been looking at over the last number of years, given the stuff that I saw in the Dropbox. I don't understand enough of it, even though I'm trying to put my arms around it. And I'm hoping that those of you that have been working hard on it will begin to educate the rest of us a little bit about the main issue. What am I voting for? Go ahead.
Yeah, Marty, you're absolutely right. I don't understand it either. Who does? This is something we've got to get out before the 3rd. There is another parallel discussion about Governor Cuomo's comments about the use of hotels, which we were going to have another letter from the Clinton Land Use Committee, but we're thinking, my conversations with Jesse at the moment, maybe we're thinking of taking it up at the next land use meeting for a further discussion to work out some kind of plan. As I understand it, the Garment Center bid is crafting a plan for what will happen to these hotels. Will they become residential? Will there be an affordable component? As you say, a complex issue. So we're hoping to take that up next month so we can flesh it out more, if that helps at all.
Then if I can add, I mean, I think that and then Christine, I see your hands up, but because Marty asked the question, I kind of want to try to answer it. In that what they're doing here is a few years ago, they asked for special permits in manufacturing zones to allow hotels to get access to manufacturing zones. We as a board generically supported that, but with the exception that we wanted to require a special permit for public purpose usage, such as conversion to homeless shelters. That did not get into the last round of legislation on the zoning text amendment. They're coming back and saying they want similarly, they want special permits across the commercial districts for hotels to standardize the way hotels are approved in the city. We're basically saying the same thing we said then, which is if you're going to issue special permit for hotels, we want to make sure that public purpose usage is not exempted from the special permit process so that we can be involved in that decision. And the concern comes now from the hotels that are in the manufacturing zones that are operating as homeless shelters and could then be more easily converted to hotels. There would be no special permit for that. And the hotels could then be converted to long-term shelter use. And because there's no special permit process there, we as a board don't have a say in that. And so we're essentially echoing what we did the last round to say, if there's going to be a special permit for hotels, we want to make sure that the special permit is also applied to public use, such as shelters.
That's right. Basically, we're just asking to be part of the conversation, part of the decision-making process.
So, and again, Marty, I'll just add on to that, again, where we are in this process is, this is the comments on the scope, right? We're asking for them to maybe the idea of studying something a little bit more, or studying a certain number of subjects more. We'll have another bite at this apple when it comes through as an actual land use application. This, not any specific hotel, just the idea of the special permit idea coming in. It's going to come back out for public review. So in between now and then, we can definitely get ourselves a little more informed about all of the details of this specific application.
Before you recognize Christine, is it two things? Is it possible to include in the letter an attempt to get some commitment from some appropriate authority to spend time with me? I mean, I really don't mean to personalize it, with people like me, because I'm not the only one, I'm sure, to help educate me more about this. I heard Paul say a public purpose hotel, shelters and stuff like that, which is already a connection that I didn't quite have. I saw in there somewhere that you could take a public purpose hotel and then sneakily transfer it into another use without going through the permitting process.
Yeah.
I don't even know the history of that and what has been done in that regard. And what am I tripping over by either voting for or against this thing?
So, and Marty, and Jesse, I'll tackle this. As we discussed at Chelsea Land Use, in the next step of the process, what we want to do is have DCP come and present on the zoning text amendment itself. So before the zoning text amendment is passed, we will request a presentation from DCP to the Land Use Committee. So that's exactly where those kinds of questions could be asked of the people who are writing this language. This letter is for the draft scope analysis work and how the zoning text amendment will impact the environment and what environmental assessment studies need to be made. So despite and Christian, I keep seeing your hand. I think you
Christine, we'll get to you. Relax. We'll get to you.
Well, I think she might have some insight here. I'm gonna defer to somebody that's maybe having some insight.
All
Or
right.
is it just a question?
No, my question is, what do you mean by adequate adjacent parking, and including a number B, or reduction in the availability of nearby parking?
Are you reading from the letter?
Yeah.
So I see that Joe has logged on. Maybe Joe can answer some of the specifics of the letter. but he's still connecting to audio right now.
I saw vague language like that in a former letter, the 2018 letter, that had something like adequate or sufficient, a woolly word that didn't accomplish.
But
in my
let's
mind
make
anything.
sure that we know what we are asking here, because I don't see why we care about adequate parking. and
Christine,
especially-
which line number are you on in the letter?
I am in the introduction of the letter. There is 3 bullets, which says the first bullet say hotel function with trash and linen. The second one say adequate adjacent parking. And
I
then
don't think you're
No,
looking
that's not
at the
this
same
letter. I don't think this is this letter. I don't see any bullets in the first 3.
Do you see a letter with a lot of yellow on it?
oh, this is the July 2. You're right. Okay,
Okay, see that just recently.
with the
Jeff
yellow. Okay.
sent one with a lot of
Okay,
yellow.
sorry about that. I was wondering why.
Me too.
Jesse, you said this letter needs to go out before full board.
Yes, the deadline is for the 1st of February, and our full board is 2 days after that. So
And can I just have an easy question, softball question. I see that in the letter, some paragraphs are yellow versus other paragraphs. What does that mean? Is there?
it's a very rough draft. That's what that means. That means that the sections are still sort of being worked on and confirmed. So this was done in very hastily due to the time constraints and also between 2 sets of committees. And so I think that is the way of the lead author, Joe's way of keeping track of the space areas that need to be.
So I guess what would be helpful if you would say in few words, what are the things that you want to be changed in their scoping? We understand it's scoping. What are the key things, 1, 2, 3, that you want to change?
Well, maybe Joe can do that.
He's not connected.
Yeah,
Very.
I want to hear from Joe too, actually.
Because one of the things that Christine answered to start answering that, while Joe's getting tuned in, at Chelsea Land Use, we talked about studying where the forecast came from, right? That they are forecasting hotel usage to 2035, and we recognize that in a pandemic, the hotel usage is very different now.
Right.
And so how are they doing those? How are they doing? So forecast of hotel usage and the time frame for that. And then the other thought is to study the impact of these homeless shelters in the hotels that were put in without special permit process. And if there was a special permit, how would that have changed things? So in that framework, but now Joe's tuned in, so maybe Joe can start to address these questions.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I apologize. I had very bad tech problems getting in.
So did you hear my question, Joe? Did you?
Yeah, can you ask me the question again, Christine? Because I couldn't hear anything.
The question was to kind of give us 2 or 3 bullets of the things that you are asking for the changes you're asking in the scoping document as a very high level.
Right. I think the major thing is what we asked for as before, that there's an exemption for shelters or social service needs. We took this position back in 2018. We should be taking it again.
What do you mean by that, by an exemption?
It's the special purpose hotels, right?
So the special permit exists for, this special permit is the one that was passed in 2018, now being extended to C zones. It was in M zones before, and it was also in the garment center.
Right.
So that permit said that if you have special purpose hotels, meaning shelters or some sort of conversion of a use that is social services, it's not subject to the special permit. In 2018, we said that should be subject to the special permit. And that's why that issue that Paul mentioned, it's already covered because it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's homeless or not, it says special purpose, right, Betty? Is that what it says?
Special purpose, yeah.
Right.
So it's become a little more urgent now that we've had, since we last.
I don't understand. Is it covered or not? Is in their scoping and in their proposal, is the special purpose hotel covered by the special permit?
The special purpose hotel is exempt under the original zoning and exempt under the proposed zoning.
And we are asking that it would be studied to be non-exempt.
Yes.
Yes, we have the same position. The issue is that the current use of the hotels for temporary use is not even covered by the zoning. It's when you convert it. So if they're just keeping it as a hotel, not changing the C of O, this would not even be, our current circumstance is not covered anyway.
And couldn't we ask under a special permit that they have to ask for the approval to change the use?
That's what we did in 2018, and we're going to do it again now.
Okay. And
We
are
did
we
the exact
asking,
same thing.
are we asking anything about concentration and saturation?
So again, I want to step back. This is a use question, right? And we were very specific about if you do a use, you have to come for a special permit. That would be one of the findings of a special permit, because it's very specific in the prior zoning, which is now being extended to the C zones. That's already included. But this mayor's office does not want anything with social services to be subject to special permit. And also,
No,
we should
right
roll
now,
back.
I was asking about non-special permit. I was asking in general whether we are requesting that there is a finding about saturation of hotels.
Yes, that's one of the findings in the special permit as proposed.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
I think though we should always remember that the issue here is that this is a deal the mayor made with the Hotel Workers Union, Local 6. So he's trying to honor his deal that he got for his votes from them, and at the same time exempts social service uses. That's why this thing seems to be kind of oppositional within itself. Same issue we had with 2018.
Any other questions? Marty, go ahead.
May I
Yeah, go ahead.
pursue a little bit with Joe? Can you talk to us about what's our intention? That's a really high level question. I see special permit, I see hotels, I see not changing the residential neighborhood in this language, and there was some vague language in the 2018 letter that talked about that. What do we have a vision, or is this just, I don't want to demean it by characterizing it.
So remember, it's not our zoning. It's zoning proposed for citywide, and it really there's a lot of complaints about hotels being built in inappropriate areas and manufacturing zones. That was the genesis of this. But then this was glommed on by the mayor to extend it citywide. And more, the idea is if a hotel is subject to special permit, that's when the unions have an ability to speak to it, because most of the small hotels are not union labor. That's the real genesis of this. There's sort of a land use thing grafted on top, which makes sense. So that's why it doesn't seem to be very clear, because it's not very clear.
And I think that what we're trying to do is take advantage of the fact that there is this motion for special permits, and we have suffered through from 2018, by having special purpose use be exempt from the special permit process. We in this community district have suffered a consequence of that, us not participating in that voice of the conversion to shelters. And we had forecasted that, and now we want to make sure, and that we want to make sure that we get special permit for special purpose uses in the commercial districts, much like we said we wanted in 2018.
So again, to note, the current circumstance, to be very careful how we draft this, would not have been covered because the buildings are not being converted to shelters. They're being temporarily used. So everything we suffer through could happen anyway. It's more what's coming, because if in fact, and I go to Christine's underlying issue, the last thing we want is to have opportunistic social service agencies and hotel owners saddling our community with an undue concentration of supportive housing and/or homeless shelters through hotel conversion. That's the bigger question coming down the pike, right? The problem is that proposal too about converting buildings and such is also via the governor in a different mechanism. So we have to make sure whatever we do here is we focus on the thing in front of us and note, here's an example how you can really get into a bad spot by what happened to us in 2018, because it's not entirely applicable. I don't want us to be trapped by saying something that's not entirely applicable. That's all. Is that helpful to everybody to sort of thread the needle on this one?
Marty's still shaking his head.
I'm
Yes or
trying,
no?
I'm sorry, I can pretend I understand it and make myself look smart, but I don't get our purpose. I don't get what this letter is asking.
All right.
I don't understand.
So Marty,
history.
let's again remember that it's not our purpose. This is a zoning change that's being brought in front of us. And we're commenting on how it should work, right? And and the things. So in 2018, the exact same zoning change came in front of us. And we commented about a number of items on it. Now we have the same set of zoning being applied to a wider set of underlying zoning districts, not just M zones, but C zones. So it definitely behooves us to comment in the same way. But then on the issues we've learned, and also to Paul's thing about what may be coming up, right? We want to just sort of flag these as items, because the problem is we don't have that information about the governor's initiative yet. It's kind of a press release in search of a policy. It's kind of like the Highline extension, where we have an image. It's not really there yet. So
It's a lot of preemptive nature here. I mean, it's,
right.
it's a lot of
Let me
preemptive.
help maybe Marty with the summary. Marty, when the last special permit was done for manufacturing, and these are very small area in our district. So if it is done for commercial, that's going to cover a much larger area in our district. And the things we are trying to avoid high level is, too many hotels close to each other. And second, the wild conversion of hotel into human services without our packaging and our help and our subject. It's not that we don't want them to be there, but we want them to be there, provided that we have the right operators, etc. So part of that process should be described in a way in the special permit, so it gives the community board the right to really
Just setting the table for our voice.
Yeah,
It's setting the table for our
help on the conversion to public service. So these are the two objectives we have. And I think then it's becoming a lot of technical approach. How do you put that into the special permit and the DCP process and the governor process, etc. And Joe knows how to do those things.
And we're sort of putting this out there so it gets considered as part of the scoping. So therefore they can't say we can't consider this at all because,
So we are doing preemptive statement.
In a way, you're saying it's a placeholder, but okay, I can go along with that. Why aren't we, Joe just articulated all the things that are missing from
this
our
letter. This letter is merely a draft from the prior one. I have been living in Chelsea, Nitroland for the past week and a half, Marty. I'm going to be looking at this tomorrow heavily for the first time in detail.
And before you got here, Paul and I mentioned that it just needs to be tweaked a little bit. So
Yes.
it talks about the draft scope, and we need
Right.
alternative and deeper dive into the analysis on
Okay.
these issues.
Thanks, Betty. All right, does anyone else have any substantive questions about this? I think
Can I just bring that last point home?
1 second, Marty. Let me just, I think we're starting to go around in circles here, because I think it's what Joe and Paul and JD have made, and Betty have made clear, is this is something that's being presented to us, so we don't have an agenda. We are trying to make sure when the issue actually comes up, we get our say. Is that a fair summation, Joe?
Yes.
All right, Marty, you had a follow-up now?
Yes, it's just following up exactly on what you just said, Lowell. Can't we include on the letter that there's a lot of information that we don't have and that we would need in order to make a more intelligent set of comments?
No, we have to note what we want them to study as part of the environmental work. That's a normal process when we're commenting on scoping.
I would say that's right. I'm not asking you to eliminate anything that's in the letter. I'm asking you to add something.
We
I'm
can't.
backing off.
Okay. So noted.
JD,
Can I ask a question?
one
Well,
second. JD had his hand up first.
Marty raises very good points. I do think that that will come up in the further discussion with both land use committees about the use of the hotels. The hotels apparently are not going to be going back until 2025, according to DCP. So we do have some time, and I hope at the next land use meeting in McClinton, we will discuss exactly what we would like to see and flesh that out for Marty. But in the meantime, I would make a motion that we do.
Hang on, JD. I'm not entertaining the motion yet. Mike Noble wanted to say something.
Gotcha.
yeah, and it's on the motion itself, actually. I think if someone were to craft a motion here that succinctly describes what we're doing, that will settle the argument.
Well, the motion would be to adopt the letter as outlined in the preliminary draft, and as would be revised by Joe, Betty, Paul, and JD in over the course of the discussions we've had. Now, does someone want to make that motion?
I make that motion.
Second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Sending the letter.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? Marty abstains. All right. Motion carries. Next item. I'm also going to turn this one over to someone. This is about from the Budget Task Force, comments on the preliminary budget that came out. And I'm turning it over to our second vice chair and chair of the Budget Task Force, Jessica Chait.
Hi, everyone. The Budget Task Force met just earlier today, actually immediately preceding this meeting, and had a chance to review the responses from the various agencies with regards to our request that we submitted several months ago. I just want to note for everybody, you probably saw, but the mayor's budget anticipates a $5.25 billion budget gap. That notwithstanding, there are quite a number of things that were in our request that have been indicated to be funded. So we should feel really good about that. And we'll be circulating that list shortly. There are obviously a number of things that have not been continued or not been recommended for funding that we want to go back with real urgency around. These issues range from things related primarily, well, not only, but to schools, to sanitation, a number of things related to NYCHA. So we will be in the process of putting together a letter that will outline our concerns, our gratitude, followed by our concerns and our requests. One important change, or one notable change, is that in this year's letter, different from last year where we broke out capital and expense, this year we're proposing putting them together, weaving them instead by category of topics. And I'll just note that in the mayor's presentation, he indicated that they were looking to fund things related to COVID response, to schools, and to essential services. And certainly most of the things, if not all of the things that we identified as having issue with not being funded are things that squarely fall into those three categories. So our intention is to be very strong in requesting these issues or these topics be looked at again. Where possible, we'll be drilling down with greater specifics. So when an ask was maybe perhaps too vague, each of the Budget Task Force members have some set of assignments to go back and bring greater specificity. At this time, given that my understanding is the window to comment on the budget is very short and the material was just released by the mayor, we, in order to get our responses within that comment period, just met today. We'll have a letter before, the hope is to have a letter before the board meeting so that the board can vote on this. So a very aggressive timeline we recognize, but many of you joined in this process as Budget Task Force members. So we're hopeful that we can get your approval to move forward with a letter as outlined just a minute ago. Any questions? Yeah, Paul. Oh, sorry. You're on mute, Lowell.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm on mute trying to tell Paul he's on mute.
I just unmuted, thanks. So just more of a question of process. And I, just from my own lack of knowledge here, somebody who might understand better. In the spreadsheet where it gave departmental responses, there are a couple of them, and notably the elevators in NYCHA, that say contact your local official for appropriations. I don't understand that response when we're contacting the local officials to set the budget. So, there are a few of them in there, and I'm just flabbergasted that that's a response. Contact.
That's standard. That's standard.
But what does that mean?
Well, I do want to note that on one of them in particular related to NYCHA, it suggests an intergovernmental NYCHA position, which many of us on the call said, oh, we didn't even know that position existed. We have a hunch, maybe we're going to obviously explore this, that some of you will remember that Brad Hoylman had considered our recommendations, and the request that is next to was actually one that he had recommended for funding at the state level. So the intergovernmental maybe suggests that that's related to that. Obviously, we're not sure, and so we agreed that we would follow up with that to explore. And there are a number of others where we have the intention to follow up. Jesse and then Joe.
I was just going to say, yeah, Paul, unfortunately, that is a response that we've seen a number of different times where basically what they do is they defer to go ask for funding from a council member or a state representative. In the past, we've responded by saying, Mr. de Blasio, you are our local representative. That's unfortunately become a canned response that has been used by multiple different agencies over the last couple of years.
The budget does have to come through both city council and mayor, right? Like, so the local.
This does not. This is the preliminary budget, so you have to recognize this is the mayor's first sort of showing of what he is planning to get as the budget to be approved of by the end of June. So this is not, and I mean, maybe there's some behind the scenes conversations, but this is not the standard, back and forth negotiating. This is what they used to call this is the dance, right? Where in the olden days, the mayor would present this budget that had no fire, no libraries, and and I forget, there was one other thing, Joe, you can remind me. There was always like the three things that the mayor would always cut, right? And then the next 3 months was spent of the council funding libraries, funding the fire department.
No arts funding.
Oh yeah, no art funding. Right. So like this, it's fortunately it's evolved a little bit more past that. But in terms of what we're leading right now is literally just the mayor's side of the story. And so when between now and June 30th, the council will be holding multiple committee oversight hearings and reviewing of the budget, and the negotiating will really start. So this is just the community's chance to say, wait a second, we think these items, you're saying housing is important because of COVID or homeless services are important, but you're not saying in the same time in our specific request about X or Y, you're not funding it.
Contact your local official, elected official. It means contact the city council member, have them fight for this line item in the budget rather than having
or them spend the money, their discretionary funds to pay for it.
Out of their discretionary funding. Okay.
Joe?
Yeah, just Paul, you understand that, NYCHA has a $40 billion capital need. And as part of the consent decree, they put up $2.2 billion and they're putting up $200 million a year. It doesn't even touch the capital need. So what's happened in the last 10 or 15 years, that signal is go to your council member, or in our case too, sometimes our state representatives, to allocate money for a specific NYCHA project. So right now in Chelsea NYCHA, we have $7.6 million that's been allocated in the past couple of years for upgrades of things, right? Which we've rolled into the whole Chelsea NYCHA plan. This is very common because the city does not have any funds to the degree needed for the capital need in NYCHA. So most likely the council member sometime this year may put some more money in as part of the budget for Chelsea Elliott, or Gail might put something for Harborview, and then it sits in the budget until NYCHA can figure out how to spend it. So the other problem is, even if it's put in the budget, it could take, how long, Jesse? Sometimes like 3 years, right? To get something done. You're on mute, Jesse.
Sorry, yeah. So yes, I mean, that's a response in a couple different places too, with specifically with SCA and NYCHA's, that it's included, but it's included in the out year plans.
Right.
So we're not talking about 2022. We're talking earliest 23, maybe 24, when that's an entirely different administration. And who knows what that out year plan will look like then, you know? So, but at least I will say that is progress to not having it at
Yes.
all. If it's in the out year plan, that at least means there's a line item somewhere that someone has to be responsive to come, you know, a year from now.
Marty?
Just want to say that this conversation I've heard various versions of over the last number of years, and there's a whole lot of it that I still don't understand, but I see it progressing and I see us getting things periodically. I am so much more comfortable voting in favor of this, even though I don't fully understand this very, very complex process, than I was the hotels, which feels so new to me.
Okay. Anyone else have questions for Jessica? And I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the response to the budget as proposed by the budget chair.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anyone not voting for any reason? All right, that passes unanimously. Next up on the agenda, we're going to get out of here early tonight. Look at this. I want to point out, I just jinxed us. Jesse's shaking his head. The full board agenda and the committee schedule were in the Dropbox. If anyone has any issues, please direct them to the district manager. For the board chair report, it's actually, after all of the chaos, been a kind of quiet month in terms of official meetings. The Chelsea NYCHA working group is wrapping up its work. The standard meeting with the homeless providers in the district is continuing. There is work being done to schedule a meeting with the Midtown North Precinct among about a number of issues, some of which are transportation related, some of which are not. And the Waterfront Parks and Environment Committee basically told the Hudson River Park Trust that a lease with the Intrepid that didn't make money for the trust was not acceptable. And I know Jeffrey has had a couple of off-the-record meetings with the, well, not off the record, but a couple of separate meetings with the trust executive board to discuss that. That's all I've got. I'll go to just Marty. Yes.
Didn't say anything about Pier 76.
Nothing has changed on Pier 76.
Cars leaving?
They are supposedly leaving. They should be gone already. I haven't driven by to check. The trust, I can tell you this from discussions, is expecting the state to pay the demo on the tow pound and the environmental cleanup. And that is going to be coming out of the state parks department budget. Once that is done, they will be coming back to WPE to talk about what they can do on the new clean blank concrete slab.
Do we have any knowledge of where the cars are going?
I haven't been towed, so no. Out of the borough, I believe.
My understanding is that they are being consolidated in the other tow pounds throughout the other boroughs. So try not to get your car commuted because you
Also looking at a small green space in Penn South, Marty.
Oh, that's good. I'll bring that to the board. That sounds right on, Joe.
I actually volunteered that open air Penn South parking lot at one point, Marty, just so you know.
Thank you. That's wonderful. We all appreciate that.
Yep. Joe, go ahead.
Yes, wanted to note that Michael and Betty and I went to our last Chelsea working group meeting this afternoon, and the report is now in draft form, and we're working on the final edits and cleaning everything up. It was quite a remarkable discussion we had this afternoon. I would say by the end of the week, there may be a draft that comes to complete for review. And then Betty, we're talking about like in 2 weeks to do a release, right? Or 2.5 weeks?
Yeah, something like that.
And
Right.
after that report is officially released, will it be coming back to the Chelsea Land Use Committee so the board can vote to approve or disapprove the work of the working group?
I think it should, sure.
I think it absolutely should.
And who does the report go to, Joe?
This is a major policy document for the city of New York, Bert. So it's going to be like there's going to be a press release. There's going to be a news on it, and the trajectory that we understand is that the report gets released, everybody comments on it, and as part of the report's recommendations, the tenants in the building become part of the committee with their advisors, meaning all of us, to help them through the RFP process. Sorry, the RFP writing process. And the goal is to have an RFP go out by the end of March. I heard that today for the first time. Realistically, I'm thinking it's going to go out in April.
But the letter is going to City Hall, or is it going to HPD,
the working group is comprised of all of us, the tenants, City Hall, and NYCHA. So it's a public document putting out, here is the proposed solution for Chelsea NYCHA. So it really becomes like,
does like the housing authority in some vote or some form have to adopt it?
the housing authority is part of the report already.
So that is then their acceptance.
Yes.
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 It's like a City Hall task force.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Like,
So it doesn't have to go to another level to be
No.
approved.
No.
this is the record of the City Hall task force, but it's
Okay.
going to get shopped around. Like it's going to go to HUD. You know, everyone's got to respond. But we've been shopping it during the course of to make sure, Bert, that the recommendations are consistent with all the external policies and requirements.
So you've done your work, a lot of work.
I'm very sure someone's going to pick it apart somewhere, Betty, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much in it. But, you know, Joe and a couple of other people have been the prime movers of the financing strategy. So when you get the report, read that part of that chapter.
Okay.
And the report's long. This is like 35, 40 pages. This is not a small thing. It's a, you know.
All right, well, we will be discussing it again, I am sure, when it comes to the Chelsea Land Use Committee.
You know, I wanted to say one thing about what I neglected to mention at the meeting today. We were all saying goodbye to each other and thanking each other. And I forgot to say that in front of Gail, that institutional knowledge, Joe, not just your experience at your job, but the institutional knowledge that you've gained over the years.
And Gail knows that.
To pull this all together.
Mike, I can promise you Gail is aware of that.
Yeah, well, I wanted to make it public, you know, and rub everybody's nose in the term limits business, you know?
Oh,
Yeah, right?
Jean Danielle.
It's an idea for a musical. I think we could do it, but before
Well,
that,
term limits.
Term limits? A musical?
yeah, before
I second that.
that, there was an
Google
item,
it on YouTube.
there was an item on the Clinton Land Use Committee about a letter about Governor Cuomo's sort of vague comments about what will happen to the hotels. I believe Joe has reported to Jesse that the Garment District is drawing up some plan, and maybe we should do that as well. The writing staff is already working on the letter. If we withdraw the letter, they want a kill fee, but let's decide tonight. I think it's a good idea to take this up at the land use committees so we can draft a larger plan rather than just have a letter going out Wednesday. Jesse, Lowell, Joe?
I second that motion. We should be a little more considered on our response than just saying crazy idea.
Okay.
So what kind of plan are you talking
Hang
about?
on, Christine. Dolores had her hand up.
No, just actually have a public discussion about it, Christine, in a meeting, you know, saying, what are the ins, what are the outs?
All right, Joe, hang on a second. Dolores,
Oh, sorry.
what's your question?
So as part of the writing staff, I wanted to comment. Brian Weber's also, as an attendee, is the other person who is assigned to the writing of this letter. So essentially, Brian raised this, and the part of the governor's response that is alarming is he said we need to convert are unused commercial and hotel space, and we need to do it now. I think the concern is that if we delay or we wait, that if we're making no comment, that other parties are coming together to have the discussion. I don't know if it's appropriate to, at least in the same way we did with Port Authority, to just be writing an administrative letter to say, you know, please engage with the community prior to doing any plans, and then we have a more robust and larger discussion at committee. I'm just concerned that things are moving forward without us.
All right.
That's reasonable.
Yeah.
All right.
And I think one of the problems is the governor's idea requires the state overriding the city zoning, which is not going to happen in a day. So just putting a marker out there, Dolores, to say, we're concerned, whatever it is, and we're going to start taking this up in a month. Engage us is a good thing.
All right. Jesse, can you bring Brian over? He has his hand up since Dolores already outed him.
And just in case if there's other people there that want to speak on this as well, you have to do *9 or just raise the blue hand under the panelists section. I mean, participant section.
Mr. Weber, floor is yours.
Hello, nice to see everybody. I think I was just going to repeat pretty much Dolores covered it all, but I think it's really important. What the governor actually did say is that we should use distressed commercial and hotels for supportive and affordable housing. And my deep concern is that directly impacts the section of the community in the West 30s between 8th and 9th Avenue, which has an abundance of value engineered budget hotels, which I think at face value readily convert to, you know, SROs. But if you look at, say, West 36th Street alone, we have over 1,000 hotel rooms on one block. And so I think it's imperative that we have the opportunity as the community board to comment and have some input on this because of what we've witnessed over the past 9 months. So that's just to sort of build upon what Dolores has said, what JD had said earlier, and what Joe is saying.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a request of the writing staff to put together an administrative letter, and we will send it out as an administrative letter as a placeholder, so we don't need to vote. And when it comes back, then we can unload with all of our guns. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Leslie has her hand up.
I just had a question, maybe Joe or Lowell, maybe you can answer this. So Gail was talking about this, I think last month, and someone else, another elected, was saying they were in rush mode to buy some of these hotels that were going up for sale. I don't know what rush mode means, and if anyone knows if there's any progress on that, if anyone's heard anything about that.
Just put the phrase rush mode and government in the same sentence, and you'll understand what rush mode is.
I'm guessing that's no.
That's what it sure sounds like. All right.
But
Not
so
seeing any other. Christine, you had something you wanted to add?
Yes, I think now I understand a little better all the pieces here, but I mean, should we do a neighborhood plan saying which hotel should become what?
There you go.
Because that's, I mean, you know, we should say this is based on our knowledge. This is the way, you know, some hotels should become residential affordable housing, some hotels should be protected, etc.
That's the idea. That's the idea, Christine, to have.
Okay, good.
And then we do some little internal task forcey thing, Christine, that lays them all out on a map and talks about them, and you know, so we put a marker out there.
Right.
You know,
He's listening. That's my amusement. Dolores.
So I guess from a structural standpoint or a procedural standpoint, we voted at committee for a letter on this topic. So we're now not going to write that letter. We're now going to write an administrative letter, and we're going to discuss even further in committee. Is that what we're doing?
Yes,
That's correct.
Right, the letter is going back to committee, and we're writing an administrative letter. I mean, the language of the letter pretty much stays the same, but it's an administrative letter. Lowell, I think we should talk also, because we're also drafting an administrative letter to the governor's office to ask them to come and talk about all the other things that he had announced over the last 2 weeks. So we might need to figure out.
I don't want to. The other one is a more positive letter than this one is. This one should probably stand alone because we're drawing a line in the sand here.
Okay.
The
So
whole point here is do no harm. Please stop what you're doing before you.
Yeah, we're drawing a line in the sand.
Well, engage us before you, yeah.
Yeah, this one needs to stand alone. The other one is, thank you for your Community Board 4 update that you disguised as State of the State. Anything else from anyone before I go to our district manager for his report? Jesse, the floor is yours.
evening, everyone. So this is real quick stuff. So in terms of the month of February coming up, like Lowell said, we have you guys have the full board agenda listed and the committee schedules. Obviously, if there's anything to edit or to add to the committee schedules, just please contact the appropriate staff member. Very quickly, so everything is as is. Normally it is for February, except for Clue is doubled up with Chelsea Hell's Kitchen land use again. But I think we're looking to remedy that. And just because we have confirmed that the Port Authority will be coming to both the land use, the Clinton Hell's Kitchen Land Use Committee, the Transportation Committee, and then the full board in March. To talk about a variety of things, but including in that is the redevelopment plan of the Port Authority bus terminal and other things. So office space, I know that sounds weird, but we have begun the search for permanent office space in the same building that we are now. And so that has begun, and hopefully we'll be looking at some larger spaces and newer spaces in the upcoming weeks. You guys
How long are we locked in on this license agreement now, Jesse?
Well, we're not locked in. That's the whole thing. So it's a license agreement. We have it until the middle of 2023, but the license agreement is not a type of agreement that the city prefers us to be in. So they are actively trying to find us a permanent space. Whether it be the space that we're currently in now with maybe an expansion or a new space that's bigger. So they want to get us to a standard 10-year lease,
Mm-hmm.
So, but we're good until 2023, no matter if like the worst case scenario. Very quickly, I met with the census U.S. Census representative, and they'll be coming to hopefully not this full board, but March's full board. We have interacted and collaborated with the U.S. Census from the very beginning. We really have had, as a board and as our office has had a real, we hosted and we connected them with Hudson Guild, and they did a lot of work with Hudson Guild and outreach there. They hosted a number of employment events through the Google space when that was up and running. We did, thanks to some of the people on this call, held some actual like micro location response meetings with building managements, companies that own buildings that were having low responses numbers. And so that was all coming through our office. So they wanted to thank us for all of the work on that. But we're also going to plan on a training for anybody that's interested on the board to sort of how to work the data and how to really crunch on that data. And so I really pushed hard on that, and they said that they would be willing to do that. Obviously, the final numbers are not out yet, so this is, it's all still being calculated. But this is a lot of good stuff is still there, and there'll be a number of summits held in each of the boroughs by the Census Bureau, probably come around April, with a lot of sort of bigger, larger picture data. But I'm hopefully getting us some training set up for us. So if anybody's interested, please let me know. And what else? I'm sorry, I'm just looking at my notes. Let's talk about space, talk about February, talked about census. I think that's it, unless anybody else has anything else, but I think that's it.
Christine.
I have a question to see, follow up the census. On the last census, the our distribution by race showed that they were 17% Asian. And in the context of getting new board members, could we, Lowell or whoever, could we meet with the Chinese embassy or any group that would potentially here, you know, kind of have contacts in the Asian community and encourage them to apply? Because we have talked about, you know, racial diversity, etc. Well, part of our racial diversity is that we have a lot of Asian in our district.
Let me take that up with Gail's office in the first instance.
And
Since they do the recruitment, and we can let them know that's something we're looking for.
Just so, yeah, and I think Christine knows this, and some of the other members who are also on the task force know that that's a real goal of the Social and Racial Justice Task Force. I put together a very kind of quick meeting with the two representatives of the task force who've sort of been tasked with some of that, Tina and Leslie Williams, and connected them with Brian Lewis and Rosie Mendez from Gail's office. So they're starting to think about some of that stuff. I don't think that particular population was the focus of their conversation, but I think it's a clear, yeah, no, the increase in that Asian population, I think is like literally 50% or something.
Oh, it was huge.
From the 2000 census. So we only can assume that it's going to be just somewhat nearly as large. So yeah, for sure. Any ideas would be fine.
So we don't have to also assume that it's Chinese.
No, and that's, you know, I do think
Asian is a wide category.
Yeah, Asian. I mean, you know, we're trying to do. I was trying to say, which place could you go to, and find, you know, connection to this population.
I just wouldn't want to involve the Chinese embassy.
I will say, I do think this is one of those things that we have to think about, where how people self-identify and how they, you know, recognize themselves. And so we as a board, you know, don't have any data or request any information of that sort. Gail's office would be the one that does that. And so, you know, I don't want to assume anything, but I do think we have increased folks that I think would be considered Asian in that, in some areas. In our board, but obviously I don't know the numbers, whether they match what's being read in our set from the census.
I would emphasize, like Bert, some being careful here, because it's a broad category, and they maybe many are Americans, so we have to be careful about.
Yeah, guys, I'll take this up with Brian and with Gail's office, and we'll let them know what we are looking for in terms of diversity. You know, I will point out that last year we added 2 women from South Asia to the board. One is still with us, one dropped off already, but we are conscious of this and we are looking for it. Anyone have anything else? New business, old business? I will entertain a motion to adjourn then.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay. Seeing all the hands volunteering to make the motion, I think it passes. Thank you all for coming.
Thank
And
you.
we will see
Good night,
you.
everybody.
Good night, everybody.